I'm Susan Albright.
I'm Maddison Albright.
And together we are Phoenix Rising. In our last episode, I spoke about my mental health and my journey. And we ended with opening up for you to be able to share yours. Maddison, since I shared so much about my own journey in the last episode and took up all the time, is there anything that you would like to share?
I spent most of my childhood sad and anxious. I grew up in a household with a lot of abuse, physical, emotional, mental abuse. There was a lot of bullying in my household. I feel like I grew up being a parent to people in the household. I have an older brother, and I think that we parented each other a lot. So we saw each other in multiple roles, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but definitely different than other people's experience. But it's like, for me, when stuff comes up, it's coming up because I'm also dealing with that in couples therapy right now with my fiance. So it's like we're doing this podcast and we're like talking about it. I'm like, God, the past 2 weeks, this is what we've been talking about. I'm counseling like my childhood trauma. And she asked me, and I'm like sitting there because Michael and I both know it, and we're both like, he's like, well, who said I'd tell her? And I'm like, we're gonna be here for a while. Like, if I tell you about the trauma from my childhood, when am I gonna tell you about my struggles now? Because you have to know all of that first to understand why I'm here. In the way that I am. My experiences in my childhood, I feel like they shaped me, but it wasn't until like a month ago that I realized that my personality traits and my behaviors are not my own. Like, they are direct trauma responses to the things that have happened to me, where I was like telling my counselor, here's a couple characteristics about myself, here's some behavioral things about myself, and then realized, like, oh my God, that's because of my trauma, it shaped me into this person, and the characteristics and behavioral. I don't regret anything in my childhood. I feel like my childhood did help shape me into the person I am, but it wasn't until recently that I was in counseling, talking to my counselor about my behavioral patterns and characteristics, that I realized that those behaviors and those characteristics are not my own. Those were direct results from the trauma that I went to. They're trauma responses to what happened to me as a child and going throughout my teenage years, that I was like, now at 26, I'm like, oh my God, like, that's not even who I really am. So it's like, going through my teenage years, my early 20s, being like, this is just the way I am, and then realizing at 26 that it's not. Like, my personality and behavioral traits, characteristics, they're not my own. They were absolutely formed from the trauma that I endured in my childhood. And I feel like my childhood trauma followed me into my teenage years. I struggled a lot with depression and anxiety because of the bullying in our house about weight. I struggled with my self-image. I had a couple of eating disorders when I was a teenager, which I paired with my depression and my anxiety, which was not a great combination to, go through your teenage years with everything else you deal with being a teenager. And the trauma, the abusive side of my childhood also followed me into relationships. Like, my relationships that I got into when I was a teenager, they followed me into adult relationships. And it wasn't until my last relationship that I realized, like, I had a light bulb go off in my head of, like, all those years of judging you for putting up with the abuse and everything they went through and being like, God, like, why don't we just leave? This is a terrible situation. It wasn't until that I went through my, like, most serious adult relationship that was very abusive that I got out of it and realized, oh my God, like, it's not that easy. It is very hard to leave an abusive relationship, especially if you have abuse already in your childhood, because it's normal to you. It's normal. This is what is expected. This is normal reality, and nothing's wrong with this. This is fine. And then one day I just woke up and I was like, you know what? This relationship is not fine. This is not okay. I deserve so much better than this, and I just cannot keep going on with the generational curses of, I'm in a broken and abusive relationship. I should just stay here because it's harder to leave. And it is. It's hard to leave abusive relationships. It's not an easy thing to do. It consumes you completely. And when you leave, it's like you have to figure everything out all over again, but how not to do it the way you just did. So a lot of my childhood trauma kind of leaked into my whole life. You know, I struggled really bad in my teenage years with depression. I had suicidal thoughts when I was a teenager. I had an eating disorder. I self-harmed. It was a tough childhood.
What did we do to assist you with your struggles?
I started antidepressants. I started taking those regularly. I started therapy throughout my teenage years to kind of help talk about everything and kind of cope with it and try not to let it leak into the rest of your lives, which is not an easy thing to do. I think it's so hard to be in that headspace, because when you're in it, it's like, I'm never going to get out of this. I'm going to be stuck here for the rest of my life, or I'm eventually just going to get so tired of it that I'm just going to end my life, because that might be easier than having to get out of the situation that I'm in, get out of the hole that I'm in. And it took me a long time my journey I call like a recovery journey, because I did self-harm, because I was suicidal, because I did have eating disorders. Self-harming and eating disorders they're problems you have to actively recover from. It's like a recovery from anything else. It's an active day-to-day choice of not doing that or not doing this, or actively having to eat, or actively having so many feelings you don't know what to do with them, but then deciding to do something with the feelings in a healthier way. Like, I did a lot of art in my teenage years when I was trying to get over the self-harming. A huge thing for me in my teenage years while I was getting over the self-harming, my recovery with that, is that I dyed my hair. Mm-hmm. That was my outlet. Instead of putting the pain onto my body with the self-harm, I started dyeing my hair. I got really into makeup. I would spend hours in my room with YouTube videos of doing different makeup looks. I would dye my hair like every other week. I was doing something with my hair. Mom was helping me chop half of my head of hair off, because I was like, I don't know, I think it'd be cool to do. So I dealt with a lot of my problems through the creativity of makeup and my hair, which ultimately led me into where I am now, because I loved it so much when I was doing it, and it did consume, the parts of, well, I could do this and I don't have to self-harm. This is better for me. It's not self-mutilation. This is healthier for me. This won't kill me, but it's a place that I can put my feelings and my hurt and my pain. I can put it into that, and I can dye my hair. I can do makeup. It was an outlet for me to put my pain. It was an outlet for me while I was going through my recovery, because you have to have something. It's an active choice of being as simple as waking up in the day and feeling like I just can't do this, to being like, well, what if you did just get up and you just dyed your hair? Maybe that's enough for the day. And it was, because I don't want to say healed, because that's not like, I don't really ever heal from it, but I've been processing it for, over a decade, and I haven't self-harmed in years and years and years. I haven't self-harmed since I was a teenager. I still struggle with my weight, but that was something that was really kind of branded into my brain from a young age, and I still struggle with it a lot. And I struggled with eating disorders in my early 20s too, and my self-harming was a coping mechanism. And I think if you've never dealt with self-harming before, people are very judgmental to it, because they're like, well, just talk about it, just be happy. It's not that simple. Not when you have wounds that are so deep. It's just not that simple. And self-harming is a release to the pain that you're feeling inside, because you don't know what to do with it. You have no other outlet. There's so much pain inside of you that you're like, God, what do I do? So you release it, but you release it on your own skin. And it's such a terrible thing to have to do, but I understand why people do it, because it is a release. It was a release to those things that I was feeling inside that I had no idea what to do with, because at that age I didn't have the tools to manage those feelings, to manage that pain. This was the only thing I could do. It felt like that was the only thing I could do to release the feelings, to have an outlet for the pain that I was feeling. And at least if I could put it on my body, then I knew that it was there. At least I did something with it. But it is a slippery slope. Like we were just talking about it earlier today on our drive here, that self-harming is such a slippery slope. It is dangerous, and it's a horrible thing to have to do. And genuinely, I do feel so much empathy about the people that think that there is no one else there and they have to turn to the self-harming. It's terrible, but I wouldn't say, like, as an adult, I don't crave self-harming or the eating disorder. I feel like I have a lot of tools now in my later 20s that I can deal with those a little better, where it doesn't have to be a self-inflicted coping mechanism. It can be as simple as waking up that day and being like, it's not a good day to, doing something with the dogs, us going out to brunch, watching movies. Like, a thing for us when we first started our healing journey in our apartment years ago, a thing for us was our coping mechanism, our things that we did together when we woke up those days and we're like, God, I don't know how we're going to go on, is that even if we had to drag each other out of the beds, even if we were like, no, I just can't, I just want to rot here, we would drag ourselves down the stairs, we would put ourselves on our couch, and we would watch movies. And our main movies we watched, that was our main coping mechanism, is we watched Mulan. Literally, we could have like totally scratched that DVD by how much we watched it. That was our coping mechanism. That was what we put all of our pain into. That's what we channeled our pain into. It was Mulan. And even as adults now, even when we're hanging out, we'll watch it, but not because of the same reasons anymore. Not because we're watching it because we need a place to put all that pain. We watch it to kind of realize and recognize how far we have come in all of our struggles.
I think as the mother, when you finally figure out that this is what's happening with your child and they're hurting so much that they are self-harming, you have a lot of guilt for not picking up on the signs soon enough. What led me to think, hey, there's something going on, is we were in some type of Zumba class or something, and she would always wear long sleeves. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. It's hot in here, and we're moving around. And why are you wearing long sleeves? And I'm like, why do you always wear long sleeves? And she got kind of squirrely on me. And I'm like, what's going on? And that's when it came out that she was cutting. And there wasn't a ton of resources to really then. When I found out, I was devastated. As a mom, you try to protect your children as much as you can, which seems ironic, but you really do try to protect your children as much as you can. And it's like, how do I protect you from yourself? As a mother, I felt like a complete failure. That my trauma, the stuff that we were living in because of my decisions, were now bleeding over into your mental health.
I feel like at the time when you found out, it was not something I wanted to talk about. I was embarrassed. I felt ashamed. I felt judged. And sometimes I just didn't want to talk about it because I wasn't ready to give it up. I didn't know if we talked about it, I was going to have to actively work on giving it up, like recovering, because we couldn't just talk about it and then I couldn't keep doing it, because by then you had already figured out all the warning signs. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's harder and harder to hide when you're having the conversation about it. But at the time I was going through it, I just didn't want to talk about it. It's a hard conversation to have, not only because you feel judged and embarrassed, but sometimes you're just not ready to give it up yet. I feel like you found out like a couple times. I feel like...
I think you went from arms to
I had transitioned.
Legs.
Yeah, once you had found out, because you can only wear long sleeves for so long, and you look kind of funky wearing long sleeves in the middle of summer in Ohio where it's humid as hell. Mm-hmm. And it's like, people are like, why are you wearing a sweatshirt? I'm like, I'm just cold. No, you're not cold. But then it's like, you find out.
Sweat's pouring down.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm so hot. I'm like red. I'm like, I'm just freezing. But I have shorts on, so like, you're not just freezing. So why are you wearing long sleeves? So then it was like, you found out. I didn't want to have the conversation. I wasn't ready. So then I just moved to places where I was doing it. I started self-harming on my thighs because I could cover that. Because I always have to wear pants no matter where I'm going. And no one's going to think that that's suspicious. Because I'm wearing pants. I have to go out in public. You don't always have to wear a long sleeve shirt. Mm-hmm. Then it was like, well, I'll just move this part I'm doing it at, because you just think I'm doing it on my arms, so I'll move to my legs. And from what I remember, I think that the self-harm it went on for a couple more years, hiding it on my legs. I feel like that was one of the main things, though, was you found out, you got upset, you were angry, you were sad. But then you got your cardboard boxes out, you and Nick, and went around the house with taking all the sharps out of the house, knives, like toolkits, fingernail clippers, tweezers, razors, shave your legs, like anything sharp in the house, it was just gone.
I did that because it was basically a form of being able to maybe control the environment. Looking back at it now, realizing that it was probably very embarrassing to you, and really didn't help, your case of feeling insecure with it. When did you feel like you were more receptive to communicating about self-harm?
I think it was probably the last time that I had done it, and I remember the day so vividly because it was like a huge turning point in my life where like I was either going to stop doing it or it was going to kill me. I was going to die from it. And that's when I was finally receptive to actually talking about it and actually healing the issue. That day was for the self-harming, that day was it was kind of like my brutal wake-up awareness moment of, oh my God, if I don't stop doing this soon, I am going to die from it. For anyone struggling with depression or self-harming or anxiety, I just want to say that it's okay not to be okay. And it's important to have those hard conversations that sometimes you don't want to have. Sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes you have to have those conversations. And it's important to have those conversations too. And it's important to remember that it's okay not to be okay.
As a mother, dealing with or trying to deal with this with their daughter, my advice to any family members that are suspecting that their loved one is cutting or has depression is to sit down in a safe area with them and have a very open conversation about what you're seeing and that you have concern for them, and start asking the questions of, are you feeling sad? Are you feeling like you would be better off not in this world? Do you have a plan to do that if you do feel like you're better off not being in this world? Are you mutilating or cutting? And ask them to be completely honest with you and make it a safe space for them to be able to be honest, so you can't judge when they are honest. You can't be reactive. Yes, you may cry, but it's not a place for anger. And allow them to talk to you about what they're going through, and don't interject your thoughts or feelings into the middle of it.